At my daughter's engagement party, my ex-wife's new husband blocked me at the entrance. You're nothing to her anymore, loser. She doesn't want to see you, he laughed. I made one call and walked away without saying a word. An hour later, the groom stormed out, threw the ring on the ground, and yelled, "You never told me who your father really was." They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what if the man you casually dismissed as a broken loser, the ex-husband you humiliated, was actually a ghost from a past so dangerous, he could systematically dismantle your entire world without a single visible strike? The elegant cream envelope felt alien, almost prickly, in Ethan Miles's calloused hand. Gold-embossed lettering shimmered under the dim light of his modest living room, a stark contrast to the quiet, almost forgotten life he'd painstakingly built over the last 7 years. His daughter, Chloe's, engagement announcement. Chloe Miles and Caleb Jones cordially invite you. 7 years. 7 long, agonizing years had passed since Sophia walked out, abandoning their 2-decade marriage for Richard Thorne, the silver-haired real estate magnate. The memory still burned, a caustic acid in his gut. Ethan tossed the invitation onto the coffee table, the expensive paper fluttering before settling. He walked to the kitchen, the familiar need for a drink already rising. At 52, he still possessed the powerful build and alert demeanor that had defined him in his previous life, long before he became plain Ethan Miles, loving husband and father. Long before he buried Dominic Valerius, the man who had built and destroyed empires from the shadows. A sharp ring of the doorbell shattered the quiet. Ethan checked the security camera on his phone, then opened it to reveal Marcus Green, his only friend from those old days who still bothered to check in. "You got one too, huh?" Marcus observed, his gaze landing on the cream envelope. Ethan simply gestured him inside. "Want a drink?" "Make it strong," Marcus grumbled, sinking into the worn leather armchair, it seems softened by years of use. "Planning to go?" Ethan poured 2 fingers of whiskey into heavy tumblers. "Chloe called. Said she wants me there." "And you believe her?" Marcus accepted the glass. Or did Richard and Sophia put her up to it? "Another chance to parade their perfect life in front of you." "My daughter wouldn't do that," Ethan retorted, perhaps a little too quickly. Marcus sighed, a weary sound. "The same daughter who believed Richard when he called you dangerous? The one who hasn't visited in 3 years. She was manipulated." Ethan's voice turned to steel, hard and unyielding. "She was 18 when Sophia took her, filled her head with lies. Now she's 25, engaged to some trust fund kid from Richard's circle." Marcus studied his friend, a man he knew better than anyone. "You sure you want to walk into the lion's den? These people aren't worth it." Ethan's eyes drifted to an old photograph on his mantle, Chloe's high school graduation. The last truly happy day before everything shattered. "My daughter," he stated, his voice quiet but firm, "is worth it." "Then I hope you're prepared for what comes next," Marcus warned. "Richard isn't known for subtlety or mercy. Neither is Sophia anymore." Ethan offered a thin, almost predatory smile. "Neither am I." After Marcus left, Ethan unlocked a hidden panel in his office closet. Inside, a safe held the remnants of his former life, documents, passports, a satellite phone he hadn't touched in 15 years. He powered it on, surprised to find it still held a charge. Old habits. He dialed the only number stored in its memory. A gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "This number is no longer in service." "The spider waits while the web trembles," Ethan said, the code phrase feeling strange on his tongue after so long. A beat of silence. Then a shocked whisper, "Dominic, is that you?" "Hello, Leo," Ethan replied, his voice emotionless. "I may need your services soon." "I thought you were dead." "That was the agreement," Ethan reminded him. "Are you still in the business? For old friends like you?" Leo's voice was dry. "Always." Ethan hung up, returning the phone to the safe. Just a contingency, he told himself. Just in case. Richard Thorne's estate sprawled across 5 acres of prime real estate, a glittering monument to his self-importance. Ethan parked his modest sedan between a gleaming Bentley and a Ferrari, feeling distinctly out of place. Security guards, earpieces discreetly tucked, scrutinized guests entering the mansion. Ethan straightened his tie, the only one he owned, and approached. "Name?" a guard asked, tablet in hand. "Ethan Miles." The guard's eyes widened slightly as he scanned the list. "ID, please." Ethan handed over his license, enduring the man's suspicious glare. Finally, he was waved through. The grand ballroom overflowed with society's elite. Politicians, celebrities, business titans, all mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played softly as waiters circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Ethan accepted a drink and scanned the room. He spotted Sophia immediately. She'd changed. The natural beauty he'd loved had been sculpted, refined, almost artificial. Expertly highlighted hair, subtle cosmetic procedures, a designer dress clinging to her still slender frame. She laughed brightly at something someone said, but Ethan saw the tension around her eyes. The same tension he'd seen when she was hiding something. "Mr. Miles?" He turned to find a young woman with intelligent eyes and a genuine smile. "Isabel Watson," she introduced herself. "Chloe's friend from college." "All bad, I assume?" Ethan's tone was light, but the question held a serious edge. Isabel looked uncomfortable. "Actually, she always spoke highly of you. Said you taught her to change her own oil and understand compound interest." Ethan's expression softened slightly. She remembered that. She remembers everything about before. Isabel hesitated. "Well, before the divorce. She's thrilled you're here, though she's nervous about how Richard will behave." "How is she really?" Ethan pressed. Isabel glanced across the room. "Happy about the engagement. Caleb seems decent. But living in this world." She gestured to the opulent surroundings. "It changes people. Sometimes I barely recognize the Chloe I knew in college." "And Sophia?" Ethan couldn't help but ask. Isabel chose her words carefully. "Mrs. Thorne is complicated. She maintains the perfect image, but there are rumors. Richard isn't always kind behind closed doors." Before Ethan could respond, the crowd shifted, and he saw Chloe. His breath caught. She had her mother's beauty, but his intensity, the determined set of her jaw, the analytical gaze. Her engagement ring caught the light as she spoke animatedly to a young man who must be Caleb Jones. As if sensing his presence, Chloe looked up. For a moment, Ethan saw surprise, then what might have been relief in her eyes. She excused herself and made her way toward him. "Dad," she said, stopping a few feet away, a wall of unspoken history between them. "You came," he replied simply. "You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would after," she trailed off. "I'll always come when you call, Chloe." The words hung between them, heavy with years of absence. She stepped forward awkwardly for a hug. Ethan enveloped her, noticing how she tensed before relaxing into his embrace. "I've missed you," he said quietly. "I've missed you too." She pulled back. "Come meet Caleb." As they turned, Ethan caught Richard Thorne's gaze from across the room. The silver-haired man's eyes narrowed, his perfect smile faltering for just an instant before he whispered something to Sophia. She looked over, her face paling when she saw Ethan with their daughter. Richard began moving through the crowd toward them. Sophia reluctantly followed in his wake. "Chloe." Richard's voice boomed as he approached. "The Hendersons want to congratulate you. Why don't you join them?" His tone left no room for argument. He positioned himself between Ethan and Chloe, his back to his stepdaughter. "Miles, I don't recall seeing your name on the approved guest list." "It was there," Ethan said calmly. "Right below daughter's father. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A technicality I should have addressed. This is a celebration for family and friends. I qualify as both." Sophia finally spoke, her voice brittle. "Ethan, please don't make a scene." "No one's making a scene, Sophia." Ethan maintained eye contact with Richard. "I came to congratulate my daughter on her engagement. Nothing more." "You've done that," Richard said dismissively. "Now, I think it's best if you leave before you embarrass Chloe further." Ethan noticed several nearby guests pretending not to listen, their ears perked. Chloe stood frozen beside Caleb, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "The only embarrassment here is your behavior, Richard," Ethan said quietly. Richard's face darkened. You think you can waltz in here and pretend to be part of this family? After everything. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let me make something clear. You're nothing here. A footnote. The sad loser Sophia was smart enough to leave behind. Ethan remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. Richard, emboldened by Ethan's silence, continued. Go back to your pathetic little life and stay there. Chloe has a real father figure now. She has me. Richard's smug satisfaction grew with each passing second of Ethan's silence. The surrounding guests had created an almost palpable bubble of space around them, pretending not to watch the confrontation while missing absolutely nothing. Nothing to say, Miles? Richard taunted, a sneer twisting his lips. Not surprised. You never could stand up for yourself, could you? That's why Sophia left. Why Chloe chose to come with us. Ethan's gaze shifted to Sophia, who looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Then to Chloe, whose expression had transformed from embarrassment to something approaching horror. Dad, she started to say, moving toward them. But Richard raised his hand to stop her without even looking back. Stay where you are, Chloe. Your mother and I will handle this. Richard turned back to Ethan. Now, as I was saying, Ethan cut him off, his voice calm, dangerously so. I'd like to speak with my daughter. That's not happening. Richard stepped directly into Ethan's path. You're nothing to her anymore, loser. She doesn't want to see you. The words echoed in the sudden, piercing silence. Richard chuckled, clearly relishing the power play. Behind him, Sophia placed a restraining hand on his arm too late. Caleb moved to Chloe's side, his expression darkening as he witnessed Richard's deplorable behavior. Ethan didn't raise his voice, didn't clench his fists. The complete absence of reaction seemed to unnerve Richard more than any outburst could have. I understand, Ethan said finally, his voice a low thrum of barely contained power. He reached into his pocket and extracted his phone. If you'll excuse me. He turned and walked a few paces away, dialing a number from memory. It's me, he said quietly into the phone. Execute protocol severance. A pause. Full spectrum. Another pause. Yes, immediately. He pocketed the phone and walked toward the exit without looking back, ignoring the whispers that followed him like a chilling tide. Sophia hurried after him, catching him in the foyer. Ethan, wait. Her voice trembled, a crack in her perfect facade. That was uncalled for. Richard just gets protective sometimes. Does he protect you the same way? Ethan asked, noting the almost imperceptible flinch his words produced. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means. He studied her face, the carefully constructed mask. Was it worth it, Sophia? Trading 20 years of marriage for this gilded cage. I'm happy, she insisted, but the words rang hollow, echoing in the cavernous foyer. If you say so. Ethan turned to leave. What was that call about? Anxiety crept into her voice, a flicker of genuine fear. Ethan paused at the door, glancing back. Just catching up with an old friend. Inside the ballroom, the party had slowly resumed its rhythm when a commotion erupted near the main entrance. Ronald Jones, Caleb's father and CEO of Jones Industries, was engaged in an intense phone conversation, his face ashen. He beckoned his son urgently. Caleb excused himself from Chloe and joined his father. Their heated whispers grew louder until Ronald's voice carried across the room. This cannot be true. That man is a security consultant from Albany. Caleb's reply was inaudible, but his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Richard approached them, champagne in hand, oblivious to the rising tension. Ronald, just the man I wanted to see about that investment opportunity we discussed. Ronald stared at Richard as if seeing him for the first time. Stay away from my son. And my company. He turned back to Caleb. We're leaving. Now. The room fell silent as Caleb walked woodenly back to Chloe. His face had hardened into an unreadable mask. Caleb? Chloe reached for his hand. What's wrong? Who is your father, Chloe? Caleb asked, his voice strained, raw. Who is he really? What? He's Ethan Miles. You know that. A security consultant. Confusion filled her eyes. No. Caleb shook his head slowly, a chilling finality in the gesture. That's not who he is. He pulled the engagement ring from his pocket and placed it on the table between them, the diamond glittering mockingly under the chandelier lights. I can't do this. You never told me who your father really was. He turned and walked away, following Ronald toward the exit, leaving Chloe frozen, the abandoned ring a cruel beacon. She turned to Richard and Sophia, her voice breaking, fractured. What is he talking about? What did you do? Richard's face had lost its color, a sickly gray. Your father is obviously spreading lies to sabotage your happiness. What lies? Chloe demanded, tears welling. What could possibly make Caleb walk away like that? Richard had no answer. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. In the parking lot, Ethan sat in his car, watching the Jones departure through his rearview mirror. His phone buzzed with a text message. Phase 1 complete. Subject's background disseminated to Jones Sr. Awaiting further instructions. Ethan started the engine. The old, familiar coldness had returned, the detachment that had once made him so effective, so feared. 7 years of playing the defeated ex-husband, the abandoned father, had finally reached its end point. Now we begin, he said to the empty car, driving away from the ruins of his daughter's engagement party. 3 days after the disastrous engagement party, Ethan sat in a nondescript diner on the outskirts of town. The vinyl booth squeaked as Marcus Green slid in across from him. Jesus, Dominic, Marcus whispered, reverting to Ethan's original name. When you said you might need contingencies, I didn't think you'd blow up your daughter's engagement. I didn't intend to, Ethan admitted, stirring his coffee, the spoon a gentle clink against the ceramic. But Richard crossed a line. So you revealed yourself to Ronald Jones. Marcus leaned closer, his voice low. Do you know the risk you've taken? You've been Ethan Miles for 15 years. Your old identity was buried for a reason. Ethan's expression remained impassive. Ronald needed to know who his son was marrying into. I simply had Leo inform him about. About what, exactly? That before I was Ethan Miles, security consultant and family man, I was Dominic Valerius. That I specialized in untraceable corporate dismantling and reputational destruction for clients who could afford my services. That I've been directly responsible for the fall of at least 7 Fortune 500 CEOs. Marcus paled slightly. You told him everything. Just enough. Ronald has his own skeletons. He'll keep quiet to protect Caleb from the fallout. Ethan took a sip of coffee, the warmth a fleeting comfort. Besides, Richard forced my hand. And Chloe? What about her? Something flashed in Ethan's eyes, a momentary crack in his composure. She'll understand eventually. She'll hate you for destroying her engagement. She already chose Sophia and Richard over me years ago. I have nothing more to lose. Ethan placed several photographs on the table. Richard Thorne has built his empire on facades, financial, social, personal. I intend to dismantle each one systematically. Marcus examined the photos, Richard with various business associates, building plans, financial documents. This is extensive surveillance. I've been watching him for 7 years, Ethan revealed. Gathering information, learning his weaknesses. Why wait until now? Ethan's joy tightened. I wanted Chloe to have her chance at happiness, even if it meant accepting Richard in her life. I stayed away, played the role of the defeated ex-husband. But when Richard humiliated me in front of her, he sent a message that I'm worthless, that my presence hurts Chloe. He paused, a dangerous glint in his eyes. It's time to send my own message. Marcus studied his friend. This isn't just about Richard anymore, is it? It's Sophia too. Sophia made her choice, Ethan said coldly. She wanted his money, his status. She gets to enjoy the collapse alongside him. And what about your old promises? Your vow to leave that life behind. That vow was to protect my family. Ethan's voice hardened, edged with a pain that contradicted his cold exterior. I don't have a family anymore. The bell above the diner door jingled as a young woman entered. Chloe. She spotted her father immediately and approached, her face a mask of controlled fury. Excuse us, she said to Marcus, who nodded and quickly vacated the booth. How did you find me? Ethan asked as she slid into the seat opposite him. I remembered you liked this place. Chloe's hands trembled slightly, barely perceptible. What did you do? Caleb won't return my calls. His father has hired security to keep me away. Ethan met her gaze steadily. I made a phone call. To whom? Saying what? When Ethan didn't immediately answer, she continued, her voice rising slightly, thick with accusation. Do you hate me that much? Was this punishment for staying with Mom after the divorce? I have never hated you, Chloe. Not for a moment. Then why destroy my engagement? Ethan considered his next words carefully. Sometimes the truth is destructive all on its own. What truth? That's what no one will tell me. Her voice rose, drawing glances from other patrons. Ask your mother. Ethan's tone remained even, unnervingly so. Ask her who I was before I met her. Ask her what she really knows about me. I'm asking you. And I'm not ready to tell you. Chloe's eyes filled with angry tears. 7 years of barely speaking to me. And now you've ruined the most important relationship in my life. Was it worth it, Dad? The word Dad hit Ethan harder than he expected. You'll understand someday. I understand perfectly now. She stood abruptly, a whirlwind of furious grief. Stay away from me. From all of us. Ethan watched her leave, her parting words echoing those he'd heard countless times from targets whose lives he'd systematically dismantled. The familiar emptiness settled over him, the void where emotion should exist. His phone vibrated with a message from Leo. Phase 2 ready. Waiting for your green light. Ethan typed his response. Begin. The headquarters of Thorne Properties occupied the top 10 floors of a downtown skyscraper, its logo emblazoned in gold against the glass facade. In the executive suite, Richard Thorne paced before floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean withdrawn? The Jones committed to that investment last month. His face contorted with rage. Well, get Ronald on the phone and fix it. He hurled the phone across the room, narrowly missing his assistant, who had just entered with a stack of documents. More problems? Asked a voice from the doorway. Arthur Hayes, Richard's business partner and childhood friend, leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Ronald Jones is backing out of the River Heights development. 40 million gone. Richard collapsed into his chair. First, his son breaks off the engagement with Chloe. Now this. Something's not right. Maybe it's related to the calls I've been getting, Arthur said carefully. 3 of our investors have asked for emergency audits this week alone. Richard's head snapped up. Who? Martin's Group, Apex Capital, and Hamilton Trust. Impossible. They can't just demand, actually they can. The language is in their contracts. Arthur approached the desk. Richard, what's going on? These are institutional investors who've been with us for years. Suddenly, they're all spooked. Richard loosened his tie, his collar feeling suddenly too tight. It's market jitters. Nothing more. Is it? Arthur placed a folder on the desk. These arrived this morning. Anonymous. Sent to my personal address. Richard opened the folder and froze. Inside were bank statements showing massive transfers to offshore accounts. Transfers authorized with his signature. What the hell is this? He demanded, his voice a guttural growl. You tell me. Arthur's voice had chilled to an Arctic snap. Because they look remarkably like records of you siphoning company funds. These are forgeries. Richard stood, face flushing, eyes wild. I'm being set up. By whom? Richard paced again, mind racing, a predator suddenly caught in a snare. Miles, he said finally. Ethan Miles. Arthur raised an eyebrow, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Sophia's ex-husband. The one you humiliated at Chloe's engagement party. He's more than that. I don't know what he is, but the Jones seem to, Richard, Arthur said slowly, a grave tone entering his voice. What have you done? Before Richard could respond, his assistant interrupted. Sir, Miss Thorne is here to see you. Sophia swept in, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. Our cards were declined at Bergdorf's, she announced without preamble, her voice tight with panic. All of them. The sales associate said our accounts have been frozen. Richard and Arthur exchanged glances. It's a banking error, Richard assured her smoothly, though his carefully. Constructed calm was fraying. Like the investment property suddenly being underwater, Sophia's voice rose, shrill and frantic. Like the calls I'm getting from our friends saying they've heard rumors about financial irregularities? Who's been calling you? Richard demanded, his own control slipping. Everyone. Barbara Montgomery said her husband pulled their money from your fund yesterday. The Whiters canceled our dinner plans with some ridiculous excuse. Sophia's perfect composure finally cracked, revealing raw fear. What's happening, Richard? Arthur cleared his throat. I think I'll give you two some privacy. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Sophia faced her husband, her voice low and dangerous. Is this because of what you did to Ethan at the party? Don't be ridiculous. Richard dismissed her with a wave. Miles is a nobody. A loser who couldn't keep his wife happy. Then explain what's happening. Richard avoided her eyes. A temporary cash flow issue. Nothing serious. Liar. Sophia's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, cutting him to the bone. You've been lying about our finances for months, haven't you? Those late-night calls, the mysterious meetings. You didn't seem to mind the benefits. Richard snapped, lashing out. The jewelry, the vacations, the status. You were happy enough to enjoy it all without questions. The accusation landed like a slap. Sophia stepped back, her expression hardening. Fix this, Richard. Whatever it takes. After she left, Richard unlocked his private safe and removed a burner phone. He dialed a number from memory. Baker Security, a gruff voice answered. This is Thorne. I need information on Ethan Miles. Everything you can find. The standard rate. Money is no object. I want to know who he really is. Across town, in a modest apartment he'd rented under an alias, Ethan monitored the bugs he'd planted in Richard's office months ago. He smiled thinly at the panicked conversation he'd just heard. His phone rang. Isabel Watson, Chloe's friend, who unknowingly had become a crucial piece in his plan. Mr. Miles, it's Isabel. I got your message about being worried about Chloe. Thank you for calling back, Isabel, Ethan said, feigning concern. Has she told you what happened at the engagement party? Some of it. Isabel sounded hesitant. She's devastated, confused. Did she mention that Richard blocked me from speaking to her? That he humiliated me in front of everyone? No, but that sounds like him. He's always controlling who gets access to Chloe and Mrs. Thorne. Ethan feigned deeper concern. I'm worried about them both. Richard has a temper, doesn't he? A pause. How did you know? Just a feeling. Ethan carefully steered the conversation. Isabel, you work at one of Richard's companies, don't you? Yes. In marketing at Thorne Development. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Any signs of financial trouble? Isabel lowered her voice conspiratorially. Actually, yes. There are rumors about payroll issues coming up, and some executives have been leaving suddenly. She hesitated. Why do you ask? Just connecting dots, Ethan replied casually. Isabel, would you be willing to keep an eye on things? For Chloe's sake. I'm concerned Richard might be dragging her and Sophia into a bad situation. Of course, Isabel agreed readily. Chloe is my best friend. After hanging up, Ethan opened his laptop to check progress on the other fronts of his operation. Leo had successfully planted doubt with key investors. Arthur had received the fabricated financial documents that were close enough to the truth to be utterly believable. Most importantly, the real evidence of Richard's questionable business practices, evidence Ethan had been gathering for years, was finding its way to the right regulatory authorities, anonymously, of course. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Richard hired Baker Security to investigate you. Time frame, Ethan typed back. 48 hours until they find what I want them to find. The pieces were in motion. The first dominoes had fallen. Soon, Richard Thorne would understand what it meant to awaken Dominic Valerius from his self-imposed exile. Arthur Hayes had never considered himself a particularly moral man. In business, especially real estate development, certain ethical corners were routinely cut. But as he reviewed the documents in his home office at 2 a.m., a cold dread settled in his stomach. The anonymous files detailed systematic fraud across Thorne Properties' portfolio, inflated valuations, double-booked assets, phantom investors. If even half of it was true, they weren't facing a temporary cash flow issue. They were facing criminal charges. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Hayes, the voice was deep, accented faintly with something Eastern European. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. Arthur straightened, a sudden jolt of adrenaline hitting him. Who is this? Someone who knows what Richard Thorne has been hiding from you. Someone who can offer you protection when it all collapses. Is this some kind of blackmail? A soft chuckle. On the contrary. It's a lifeline. Richard has been systematically looting your company for years. The evidence is already with the SEC. You have perhaps 48 hours before the investigation becomes public. Arthur's mouth went dry. What do you want? Distance yourself from Richard publicly. Immediately. Claim ignorance of his actions, which, based on your reaction to the documents I sent, is largely true. How do you know about those documents? Arthur demanded, then realized. You sent them. Smart man. Unlike your partner. Why are you doing this? A pause. Richard took something from someone I respect. This is simply cosmic balance being restored. The line went dead. Arthur sat motionless for several minutes. Then he began making calls. First to his personal attorney, then to a crisis management firm. By dawn, he had the framework of a plan to salvage what he could from the impending wreckage. At the Thorne mansion, Richard awakened to an empty bed. He found Sophia in the kitchen, still in her nightgown, staring at her tablet. You should see this, she said without looking up, her voice hollow. Richard took the tablet. On screen was a financial news website with the headline, Thorne Properties Under Scrutiny. Co-founder Hayes distances himself from concerning practices. What the hell? Richard grabbed his phone and dialed Arthur, who didn't answer. That backstabbing son of a bitch. Is it true? Sophia asked quietly. Are we in trouble? Before Richard could respond, his phone rang. Baker Security. Mr. Thorne, we have preliminary information on Miles, the investigator reported. It's unusual. What did you find? Nothing. Literally nothing before 15 years ago. Ethan Miles appeared out of nowhere with perfect documentation, but no history. It's the kind of identity created by witness protection, or the investigator hesitated, or what? Or someone with very specialized skills and connections. The man's voice lowered, almost a whisper. There are rumors in certain circles about an operative called the Architect, who disappeared around the time Miles appeared. Known for constructing and executing the systematic dismantling of individuals deemed untouchable. Richard's blood ran cold. Are you saying Miles is this architect? I'm saying it's a possibility you should consider. My advice? Whatever you did to anger this man, undo it. Immediately. Richard hung up and slumped into a chair, mind racing. Could Miles really be some sort of professional destroyer? It seemed absurd. The quiet, defeated man he'd humiliated at the engagement party didn't match that profile. Yet, the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Everything had started unraveling after that night. After Miles's mysterious phone call. Richard? Sophia's voice broke through his thoughts. I asked if we're in trouble. He looked at his wife, still beautiful, but showing the stress of recent days. The woman who had left her husband of 20 years for the wealthier, more powerful man. We'll be fine, he lied, the words tasting like ash. I need to make some calls. He retreated to his study, locking the door before accessing his own set of offshore accounts, ones even Arthur didn't know about. The balances were healthy enough to disappear and start over somewhere with no extradition treaty. Richard had always maintained an exit strategy. He just hadn't expected to need it because of Sophia's ex-husband. His computer screen suddenly went black. Then displayed a single message. Remember the man you called a loser? He remembers you. Richard stared at the words, a chill running down his spine. He reached for the panic button under his desk, the one connected directly to his security team. Nothing happened. No response. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They can't help you. Richard rushed to the window and drew back the curtain. The security guards normally stationed around the property were gone. He was alone in the house with Sophia, completely exposed. For the first time in decades, Richard Thorne felt genuine, gut-wrenching fear. Across town, Ethan sat with Marcus and Leo in the rented apartment, monitoring the surveillance feeds from the Thorne mansion. Richard's panic was palpable, even through the grainy cameras. Phase 2 complete, Leo noted with professional satisfaction. His business reputation is in freefall. Arthur Hayes has fully separated himself. The SEC investigation launches officially tomorrow. And the personal accounts? Ethan asked, his voice even. Flagged with multiple agencies, Marcus confirmed. He can't access his exit strategy funds. We've effectively trapped him. Ethan nodded. Begin Phase 3. Are you sure? Marcus looked concerned, his brow furrowed. Phase 3 directly impacts Sophia and Chloe as well. They chose him, Ethan said coldly, his eyes fixed on the screen. They can share his fate. Dominic, Leo said carefully, using Ethan's original name. You've accomplished your goal. Richard is ruined. Is the rest necessary? Ethan's expression remained impassive, a mask of stone. Richard didn't just steal my wife. He poisoned my daughter against me. Made me a stranger in her life. This isn't just about punishment. It's about truth. They all need to see who Richard really is, who I really am. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering city below, a world he once commanded. And most importantly, they need to understand that betrayal has consequences. Consequences that can't be undone with apologies or regrets. Marcus and Leo exchanged glances, but said nothing. They had known Dominic Valerius long enough to recognize when his mind was set. The man who had once brought corporate giants to their knees without ever showing his face was fully awake again, and Richard Thorne had become his personal target. The Gala fundraiser at the Metropolitan Museum had been on the city's social calendar for months. Despite the whispers about Thorne Properties' financial troubles, Richard and Sophia arrived in their usual style. He in a tailored tuxedo, she in a couture gown that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Smile, Richard hissed through his fixed grin as they posed for photographs. Everything is normal. Sophia complied, though the strain showed around her eyes. The past week had been a nightmare of frozen accounts, canceled credit cards, and increasingly frantic calls from Richard. Their perfect life was crumbling, and she still didn't understand why. Inside, the reception was chilly. Former friends suddenly found reasons to drift away when the Thornes approached. Conversations hushed as they passed. Richard, Sophia. Arthur Hayes greeted them with exaggerated cordiality, cameras flashing nearby. You backstabbing parasite, Richard growled under his breath, maintaining his smile. We built that company together, Arthur said, his voice laced with venom, and one of us apparently decided to dismantle it alone. He sipped his champagne, watching Richard. The SEC investigators had quite a lot of questions about those offshore transfers. Fortunately, I had no knowledge of them. Those records are fake and you know it. Are they? Arthur's eyes hardened, cold and calculating. Because they match some discrepancies I've been noticing for years, but chose to ignore. My mistake. Before Richard could respond, Arthur turned to Sophia. I'm sorry you've been drawn into this, Sophia. I know how important social standing is to you. The barb was delivered with perfect politeness, a poisoned silk glove. As Arthur walked away, Sophia gripped Richard's arm painfully. What is he talking about? What offshore transfers? Not here, Richard muttered, guiding her toward the bar, his fake smile still plastered on his face. As the evening progressed, Richard grew increasingly desperate. Key business relationships were disintegrating before his eyes as former allies publicly aligned with Arthur instead. The whispers had become brazen discussions of Thorne Properties' impending collapse. His last hope was Frederick Stone, whose investment firm controlled sufficient capital to potentially stabilize the situation. Frederick. Richard approached the silver-haired financier with forced joviality. Just the man I wanted to see. Frederick regarded him coolly. Richard, I was actually hoping to avoid this conversation. I understand there have been concerning rumors. Richard began his prepared speech, but I can assure you save it. Frederick cut him off, his voice sharp. I received some very interesting documents yesterday. Recordings, actually. Richard faltered, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Recordings of you discussing how you play investors like me. How we're stupid old men easily manipulated by your projected confidence. How you've been misrepresenting assets for years. Frederick's expression was glacial. Particularly illuminating was your joke about my daughter, the one you tried to seduce at my holiday party last year. The blood drained from Richard's face. Frederick, my firm is formally severing all ties with Thorne Properties. Effective immediately. Frederick turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The man who provided these recordings suggested I ask you about the loser you humiliated. I think you know who he means. As Frederick walked away, Richard scanned the crowded room frantically. Was Miles here? Watching his destruction unfold? The sound system crackled suddenly, the soft background music replaced by a familiar voice, Richard's voice, in mid-conversation. Of course, the properties are overvalued. These investment dinosaurs don't know the difference. By the time they figure it out, we'll have their money, and they'll have worthless paper. The room fell silent as the recording continued, revealing Richard's contempt for investors, partners, even the charity organizations they claimed to support. Richard lunged for a nearby server who was controlling the sound. System. Shut it off. But the damage was done. Hundreds of influential people stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Sophia had disappeared from his side. He found her in the coat check area, her hands shaking as she gathered her things. Sophia, wait. Was that real? She demanded, her voice raw with disbelief and fury. Those recordings? Of course not. The lie came automatically, a reflex. Don't. Her voice was tight with suppressed rage. Don't you dare lie to me now. Not after you've destroyed everything. I built everything. Richard snarled, grabbing her arm, his own desperation boiling over. Everything you enjoyed for the past 7 years. The homes, the vacations, the status you craved so badly. You left your husband for it. Sophia wrenched free. I left Ethan because you promised me security, a better life. And delivered it until Miles decided to tear it all down. Miles? Sophia looked stunned. Ethan is behind this? Your pathetic ex-husband isn't who you think he is. Richard's voice dropped to a harsh whisper, laced with a new kind of fear. The man you left, the man I humiliated, he's systematically destroying us, using skills and connections neither of us knew he had. For the first time, genuine terror showed in Sophia's eyes. What did you do, Richard? What did you do to provoke him? Outside the museum, Ethan watched the Thornes argument through binoculars from a parked car. Beside him, Leo monitored the audio feed from the microphone in Sophia's purse, planted weeks ago by Isabel, who believed she was helping Chloe by keeping tabs on Richard's volatile behavior. She's finally seeing him clearly, Leo observed, his voice devoid of judgment. Too late, Ethan replied without emotion. The SEC moves tomorrow. Their assets will be frozen by morning. His phone rang. Chloe's number. He answered on speaker. Is it true? Her voice was raw, afraid. Are you destroying Richard's business? His reputation. Who told you that? Mom just called, hysterical. Said you've been planning revenge for years. That you're not who I think you are. Ethan considered his words carefully, choosing them like weapons. Your mother made choices, Chloe. Richard made choices. Now they're facing consequences. So it is you. She sounded shaken, her voice barely a whisper. The business problems, the social humiliation, Caleb breaking our engagement, all because Richard insulted you at a party? This was never about an insult. Ethan's voice hardened, the ice returning. It was about what they took from me. What they took from us. What are you talking about? Ask your mother about Dominic Valerius. Ask her what she knew when she married me. When she left me. The line went silent for several seconds, the weight of a lifetime hanging in the air. Who is Dominic Valerius? Me. Ethan ended the call and turned to Leo. She'll search for information now. Make sure she finds exactly what we want her to find. As they drove away from the museum, Ethan's expression remained impassive. But inside, something shifted. Not regret, precisely. A recognition that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt, even with his only daughter. 3 days after the Gala disaster, Richard sat in his home office, surrounded by empty liquor bottles. The television droned with news of Thorne Properties' spectacular collapse. Federal agents had raided their offices. Arthur Hayes had turned state's evidence. Investors were filing lawsuits. Everything he'd built over decades, gone in a week. The security system chimed, announcing a visitor. Richard checked the camera feed to see Sophia's ex-husband standing at his front door, alone and unarmed. Richard buzzed him in, too defeated to even feel anger anymore. Ethan entered the office without knocking, his presence filling the room despite his casual attire. He surveyed the disheveled space, the unshaven man before him, with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a failed experiment. Miles, Richard attempted bravado, though his voice cracked. Or should I call you Valerius? Either works. Ethan remained standing, a silent, imposing figure. Though only one of those men officially exists. What do you want? Come to gloat over your handiwork? Just to deliver a message. Richard laughed bitterly. It's not over. What's left to take? My company's destroyed. My reputation ruined. My assets frozen. You still have your freedom, Ethan observed. Temporarily. The implied threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Richard reached for his drink, his hand trembling. How did you do it? All of it. Methodically. Ethan's tone was conversational, chillingly calm. I placed listening devices in your home and office 3 years ago. Gained access to your financial records. Cultivated relationships with your associates to identify vulnerabilities. Why wait so long to use it? I was content to observe, to let you self-destruct naturally. Ethan's expression hardened, the last vestiges of his Miles persona falling away. Until you decided to humiliate me in front of my daughter. Until you blocked me from speaking to her at her own engagement party. All this because I hurt your feelings? Richard sneered, clinging to his last shred of defiance. No. All this because you're exactly who I knew you were. An arrogant fraud who stole my family and thought there would be no consequences. The front door opened and closed downstairs. Heels clicked on marble as Sophia called out Richard. She appeared in the doorway, freezing at the sight of Ethan. What are you doing here? Hello, Sophia. Ethan's voice softened imperceptibly, a ghost of a past affection. You're looking well, all things considered. Sophia stepped into the room, her designer outfit contrasting sharply with her exhausted, haunted face. Have you come to finish destroying what's left of our lives? That depends on Richard. Ethan turned back to him. The SEC has evidence of your financial crimes. The FBI has recordings of you discussing bribery of government officials. You're facing decades in federal prison. Richard paled further, his bravado utterly gone. What do you want? A full confession. Every illegal act. Every person you've harmed, delivered to the authorities tomorrow. You're insane. Richard scoffed. Why would I do that? Because I'm offering you a choice. Confess and receive a reduced sentence, or resist and watch as additional evidence emerges implicating Sophia as a knowing accomplice. Sophia gasped, her eyes wide with terror. You wouldn't. Ethan turned to her, his expression unreadable. Wouldn't I? You chose this man over our 20-year marriage. You helped turn Chloe against me. Why should I protect you now? Because you loved me once, Sophia whispered, a desperate plea. Love. Ethan repeated the word like it was a foreign concept, alien to his current state. Did you think about love when you were planning your exit strategy? When you were transferring funds to your private account months before you left? Richard looked at Sophia sharply, a dawning horror on his face. What private account? The one she opened 6 months before leaving you, Ethan informed him, his voice clinical. She'd been methodically preparing to leave you for over a year, Richard. Finding ways to maximize her position for the divorce. Sophia shook her head frantically. That's not, don't bother denying it. Ethan cut her off. I have the bank records, the lawyer consultations, everything. You weren't Richard's victim, Sophia. You were his willing accomplice. In fact, you approached him first. Richard stared at Sophia with dawning comprehension, the full weight of her betrayal crushing him. You told me you were unhappily married. That Ethan was controlling, possibly dangerous. She needed a justification, Ethan explained dispassionately. A narrative that made her the victim rather than the betrayer. Is this true? Richard demanded, his voice thick with shattered trust. Sophia's silence was answer enough. I'm not here to repair your broken relationship, Ethan continued, his gaze sweeping between them. I'm here to deliver terms. Richard confesses to everything tomorrow, leaving Sophia's name out of it. Or I ensure you both face maximum consequences. Why would you protect her at all? Richard asked, bewildered. I'm not protecting Sophia. I'm protecting Chloe from seeing both her parents destroyed. Ethan checked his watch. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. As he turned to leave, Sophia followed him into the hallway. Ethan, wait, please. He paused, but didn't turn. I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice breaking, fractured by despair. I see that now. Richard isn't who I thought he was. Neither am I, apparently, Ethan replied coldly. It's not too late for us. Sophia reached for his arm, her fingers trembling. We could start over. I still care for you. Ethan finally turned, his eyes revealing nothing, an empty, desolate landscape. 7 years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. I would have forgiven everything. Hope flickered in her eyes, fragile and desperate. And now, he continued, crushing it. Now I see you clearly. You're not returning to me because you love me. You're running from the consequences of your choices. He gently removed her hand. There is no us anymore, Sophia. There never will be again. He walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway of the mansion that would soon no longer be hers. Outside, Ethan sat in his car, allowing himself a moment of quiet reflection. His phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. I know who Dominic Valerius is now. We need to talk. The small waterfront park was deserted in the early morning light. Ethan sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, watching sailboats rock gently in their slips. This had been Chloe's favorite place as a child, where he'd taught her to skip stones and identify different birds. He sensed her presence before seeing her. She sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance, the gap between them as vast as the ocean. Did he confess? She asked without preamble, her voice thin, fragile. Yes, this morning, to federal authorities. He'll likely serve 5 to 7 years. Ethan kept his gaze on the water, the horizon a blurry line. Your mother was excluded from the charges. You're doing that? Yes. Chloe exhaled slowly. I spent all night researching Dominic Valerius. There isn't much to find, but what exists is terrifying. You were a professional destroyer. Her voice held a mix of disbelief and awe. They called you the architect because you designed custom destruction for powerful people's enemies. Ethan nodded, accepting the title. I specialized skill set. You disappeared 15 years ago, right before you met Mom. I wanted out. A normal life. A family. Ethan finally looked at her, his eyes holding a universe of pain and decision. I buried Dominic as completely as possible. Became Ethan Miles with help from people who owed me favors. Did Mom know who you really were? Not at first. I told her after we were married, when she was pregnant with you. She accepted it, or seemed to. Chloe processed this, then continued, her voice low. And when she left you, she used that knowledge as leverage. Implied she might reveal my past if I fought too hard for custody. A muscle tightened in Ethan's jaw. She knew exactly how to ensure I'd back down. So you let us go. I let you both go to protect you from my past. And then watched as Richard systematically turned you against me. Chloe stared at her hands, guilt and anger warring within her. I believed him. Believed Mom when they said you were unstable, potentially dangerous. They weren't entirely wrong, but you weren't what they described either. She looked up, eyes glistening with tears. They took away my father. And now you've taken away my mother's husband, my fiancé. Caleb left on his own once he learned the truth because you made sure he learned it. Chloe's voice rose, betraying the fragile control she tried to maintain. Was that necessary? Destroying my relationship, too. Ethan met her gaze steadily, unflinching. Caleb deserved to know who his future father-in-law really was. The choice to leave was his. And now what happens? Now that you've destroyed everything, Richard pays for his crimes. Your mother starts over. And you. Ethan hesitated, the quiet hum of the harbor the only sound. You live your life free from their manipulation. What about us? The question hung between them, heavy with 7 years of estrangement, a desperate, fragile plea. Can we repair what was broken? Ethan considered his response carefully, every word weighed, every syllable a decision. I will always be your father, Chloe. That never changed. He paused, the silence stretching. But trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. You chose to believe the worst about me without question. You accepted their narrative because it was convenient. I was 18, she protested, confused, hurt. And in the 7 years since? The unanswered calls, the returned letters. Ethan's voice remained calm, but firm, a wall she couldn't breach. You made choices, too. Tears spilled down Chloe's cheeks, a silent, heartbroken cascade. So, there's no forgiveness? No second chance. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about recognition. Ethan stood, looking out at the endless expanse of the harbor, a metaphor for their own vast distance. Some damage can't be undone. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. What about Caleb? Could you speak to him? Explain? Ethan shook his head, a final, definitive movement. That's not my responsibility. If he truly loved you, knowing your father's identity wouldn't have changed that. So, I lose everything because of who you are? No. Ethan's voice hardened slightly, a subtle, but undeniable shift. You lose nothing because of who I am. The consequences you're facing come from the choices made by your mother, by Richard, and yes, by you. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you, Chloe. Even when you stopped believing in me. Ethan walked away, his steps measured and deliberate. Behind him, Chloe remained on the bench, face in her hands, the echoes of his words, and her own, reverberating in the quiet park. The final phase of his plan was complete. Richard would serve his sentence. Sophia would rebuild from nothing, without the wealth and status she'd betrayed her family to obtain. Chloe would find her own path, perhaps wiser about human nature. And Ethan Miles, or Dominic Valerius, depending on who was asking, would continue his solitary existence, neither hiding nor flaunting his true nature any longer. As he drove away from the waterfront, his phone rang. Marcus's number. It's done, Ethan answered without preamble. Are you satisfied? Marcus asked, his voice cautious. Ethan considered the question. Satisfaction implied he'd been seeking emotional resolution. What he'd executed wasn't about feelings. It was about justice. Cold and precise. Justice was served, he replied finally. And your daughter? Any reconciliation? No. Ethan's tone was final, the last note in a melancholic symphony. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. What will you do now? Ethan glanced at the safe house address Leo had texted him. A place to lie low while the media frenzy around Richard's confession died down. Continue, he said simply. Just continue. The sun rose higher over the city skyline as Ethan drove toward his uncertain future. Behind him lay the wreckage of those who had betrayed him, not destroyed in a burst of vengeful rage, but dismantled with the precise, methodical skill that had once made Dominic Valerius legendary. The man they had called a loser. The man they had dismissed and humiliated had shown them exactly who he was and who he had always been. I'm still grappling with this one. Was Ethan's revenge justified, even if it meant hurting his own daughter in the process? Did Chloe bear some responsibility for her own pain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on this.